right, and we are live, episode 11. It's funny I keep saying live because actually we're not. We're just filming. But we are episode 11 with Shruthi Rao. She is a licensed therapist, combining a lot of more like modern somatic practices with like traditionally spiritual techniques, which I fucking love. I've just been getting into more somatic stuff, which I'm sure we'll touch on.
Yeah.
Shout out to David. I just had a great episode. Really happy to have him here. Always my boy Nils and Alexander. These sick new lights. I didn't even mention that. Love these lights.
Really
but we're not here. I guess in some way maybe we are here to talk about light. But Shruthi, we're here because you, when we were talking at Altar, you were saying, I asked you, what do you want to talk about? And you just were like, alchemy. And I was like, okay. It was funny. I was actually just on a date with a young lady last night, and I gave her a copy of the book, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, which I fucking love. But first, just tell us a little bit more about like what you do.
Yeah. So I am a therapist. I just opened up my own practice.
A little bit closer with me, just a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I wanted to really combine spirituality and psychology. I've been a therapist for a long time, but then I noticed that there was only so far you could go, and I did this with my own healing too. There's only so far you can go with just focusing on the mind. And we hit a plateau in our own healing, so we actually have to incorporate our body wisdom into it, the feminine energy, and then actually listen in. So using somatic practices, using that to see what are like the energetic patterns of our subconscious, and then how do we use that to almost transmute some of our old stories or subconscious beliefs. And then so with somatic yoga, with just understanding what are the underlying energy that we're working with, we're actually able to like make more headway in therapy, and when we combine the mind and the body together.
It's just so crazy to me because I'm pretty sure I spoke about it in earlier episodes, but like my own story is, I've been very dedicated and involved with a nonprofit spiritual organization called the School of Metaphysics, and it's metaphysics. It's a school of the mind. And actually now we're having a lot of conversations in my class with my teacher, like what would happen if we were more of a school of mind and heart. But that's an aside. I was struggling for like years with this like feeling of like doubt, fear, frustration. Like they would keep coming up, and I'd learned the techniques of like how to investigate the mind. And I would say I know that a lot of the times, our symptoms come up because deeper in our minds, there's some thought that was maybe repressed, is archetypal, is foundational in the mind, and it's hidden because of our normal psychological defense mechanisms. And you think of your Freud and Jung stuff, and it's manifesting. But I searched like over and over and over, and I couldn't find it. At my school, we do these. You may have heard of. You've heard of like Akashic record readings.
Oh yeah.
So we do a really powerful. We call them an intuitive report. And I finally asked about that. I said, "What blocks does this one have in the mind that is like preventing? That's like causing all this stuff?" And they said, "Oh, not many." And I was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's more in the body." And I was like, and that was an entire game changer for me. And it did recommend somatic practices.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can see that when you think about emotion, it's emotion, energy in motion, right? So there is a big body component to it. And if you think about like the chakra system as well, a lot of fear, doubt, shame, guilt, that kind of resists like sits in the lower chakras. And what we actually have to do is use acceptance, bring actually that closer rather than push away, and it actually moves that energy up. So we can actually use a lot of somatic practices because trauma is held in the body. Our emotions are held in the body, even if we don't realize that in the moment when we interact with our physical world, that it will literally be stuck in the fascia of our body. So just moving and even like therapeutic massage, things like that actually helps move the energy around while we're also connecting with our mind. And then we actually just allow the energy to stay there and accept it. And then it actually shifts and moves to other parts of our body, or we release it.
I'd love, at some point, don't let me not do this, because release is one of the things I have not figured out fully yet. And I've been learning more about like the processing. Although just as like a sillier note, I love when you think of like when you're talking about like the chakras and like the lower emotions. I always think of Avatar, you know, that one famous scene where he's like working with the yogi. And I mean, I know there's actually a lot of spiritual people have said like, actually, yeah, that was kind of a well done scene, but I had a special place in my heart. But yeah, it's a practice I had been aware of for a while of just like this getting closer to the feelings that we normally shy away from. And that this, not alone, but that this is a highly powerful, you could even say like revolutionary new movement in like human consciousness. So like just, oh my God, just feel shit, you know?
Easy done. just
I know.
feel it.
I know. I was because that was something that I don't know if you saw Luke's podcast. I mean, Luke's also, yeah. And when he was talking about just like welcoming things, and I love how he said it. He said, the more I welcome my pain, like the less I have to learn from it. So please say more about that aspect before we really deep dive in so much of this.
Yeah. So I did watch that episode, and it was so good because he does
Luke's such a light, isn't he?
He does a really great job of talking.
He gets so excited. I love him so much.
And he's so insightful when he channels all of this stuff too, of like how we actually the shadow and
great
how we
dancer.
push. Oh my gosh, he is one of the most ecstatic moves I've ever seen. And he has this way of like the shadow really is parts of us that have pushed our emotions and things that we hold in shame and guilt away from us. So we can't create or find a solution with the same consciousness that created it. I love that quote. So if we are initially separating ourselves and creating barriers, we can't actually say, I don't want this part of me. And that actually will be the way to release it. The way to release, interestingly enough, is to actually open it back into our emotion back into our body. So this is like this big gate that we find ourselves in therapy and our spiritual work that, oh, you know what? This is not comfortable for me. This is not light. This is not evolved type of situation. I don't want this. But actually, when we walk towards it, we actually see parts of ourselves that our ego does not want to face. And we're like, oh, you know what? This is a shadow side to me. This is like a deep subconscious pattern that keeps coming back into my world to show me something, to allow me to actually embrace it, bring it in closer, and actually integrate those darker aspects of ourselves so that we can actually create a greater capacity for ourselves to move into light.
Later, I also want to touch on that greater capacity thing. You know, it's in my own experience, because it was something I had sort of intuited and then was, you know, synchronicity works and, you know, divine revelation and whatnot. Yeah, you find things, then you find that you come in with understandings and they're intuitive, but that's neither here nor there. It like makes sense to me why this is kind of like, I mean, it's a newer way of thinking in its modern uptaking. This is stuff that, you know, many like spiritual traditions were very well aware of. I mean, mindfulness of the Buddha, just observing things like, you know, that was, you know, 2,500 years ago.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, it's interesting because I actually had a conversation with I was so nice. It was this, I forget his name. He was a professor of like Buddhism over at like Harvard. And like I cold called him, like asking for help with something. And he gave me his time. And, you know, he talked about how one of the things that's sometimes missed in the therapeutic practice of mindfulness is you try to box it as just like itself, and you borrow it from the Buddha, who of course, you know, also learned it from just a long lineage of Indian philosophy, and you try to separate it from the rest of the package, and you try to separate it from, well, you know, the Buddha's goal was obviously mostly enlightenment and you know, making people feel better, but I mean the main thing the guy was trying to do, you know. But where was I going with that? it makes sense to me why this has been shied away from, because, you know, of course we don't want to feel bad. You know, we have, I think a lot of spiritual people often lament the ego because, yeah, it does create challenges, yet it protects you, you know, and that was its point. You don't like feeling bad. You have built-in mechanisms to help you do that. And we don't even fully understand that. So, I mean, it makes sense that, but it's so crazy because once you start feeling bad at one level, it's so transformative.
Yeah, it is, because you almost learn how to sit still in the chaos of it all. You're like the eye of the storm through all of it, right? So there's so many spiritual teachings that tell you how to be the seat of self. How do I stay grounded in who I am, despite no matter what external or circumstances that I have going on? And, you know, it's like that Christ consciousness, it's the Atman, it's the sense of self. We also have a lot of therapy modalities that also talk about, like, I am separate from thought. I am separate from emotion. I am the observer. Like, cognitive behavior therapy does that, and internal family systems therapy does that.
I love IFS.
Yeah, and it's such a spiritual practice because there's so many ways that I have full capacity to be limitless, and I observe all of these parts working together. And it's essentially the same with spirituality, that so many other traditional spiritual practices actually touch on, that I am the seat of self. And then knowing that the ego, we do need a healthy dose of ego to survive in this world. We absolutely do. But, you know, it's the ego that's the shadow side of our ego that we actually need to, like, bring in closer and then almost give it a different role in itself, which is IFS, and then give it and then integrate that back in and say, how do I make this work for me? So now I'm actually using my external world to reflect parts to myself, and now using my seat of self to make a decision of how do I make this work for me rather than against me.
You know, it's there's a lot of humility in stuff like this because, well, one, you have to, I mean, it was like I was talking with David, you know, as you grow in the light, you know, you shine the light everywhere, and there is just,
even the dark spaces.
And there is a powerful spiritual wisdom, and you just have to feel it. And I think a lot of the humility is, you know, you feel like this shouldn't have happened to me.
Control.
Yeah. And even beyond that, I mean, you know, you could get into, if you want to be really spiritual, like the karma of why did something terrible happen to me?
Yeah, why does bad things happen to good people?
Yeah. And, you know, you can get all into that, and then you could take away the spirituality of it, and, you know, something really awful said to me. I don't even want to, like, verbalize some of the things that could happen. And the humility of, even though I so firmly believe with my gut, my heart, my brain, this should not have happened to me, this did happen to me. And I don't want to accept it. I don't want it to be some powerful defining moment for me, yet it's one of the people sitting at the table in my mind and my heart. And you have to bring that back in.
Yeah.
Because when you don't, I always love in my school, I often teach the kids, the students. They're usually not kids. Part of the reason why I think stuff always comes back up is that your mind is almost like a house, you know? And if you just keep taking your garbage and your dirty laundry and you don't clean it, you don't throw it away, you know, if you just keep throwing it in your basement, maybe you never go in your basement. Eventually the smell is going to make it up to the surface. Yeah. And then you're like, oh, where's the smell coming from? You're going around your house, but you never go to a place where you threw all the junk.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a subconscious pattern and a belief that just kind of runs rampant in the background and always kind of dictating everything that's going on in our world. So you could sit there and run yourself ragged trying to ask, like, why does this keep coming up? Why do I keep meeting the same kind of people over and over and over again in a different mask, in a different costume? It's because we have not done the energy work to shift our energetic pattern, our subconscious belief, to actually see that maybe I need to be a different mirror to the world. And I think I do that a lot with my own personal practice, and also what I do in therapy is actually use one of our biggest spiritual teachings is that everything is a mirror. Every interaction, every person that comes near you, every circumstance, our relationship with money is actually a mirror to ourself and the belief and the self-love that we have for ourselves.
Do me a favor, because I've heard that concept many times, yet it's one that's just never fully landed on me. Explain your understanding of that particular teaching.
The mirror concept?
That people are a mirror to you.
Yeah, we're all sacred mirrors to each other. Is that our consciousness creates a certain energetic frequency that gets put out, and that actually brings it in closer so that part of our shadow can actually come back to the surface, and or our light, actually, because we can also reflect light from each other too. And then, so it's just to bring in higher awareness of what's actually in my field. And it's actually awareness of who am I energetically on a basic level. And I've used that. I can use a personal example too.
Please.
I had a really tough transition period with an ex-employer. And it was a very difficult conversation that came out that brought up a lot of ego, and there was a lot of judgment that came through, and I wanted to be that person that was like, I don't deserve this, I can't believe someone would treat me this way, this is what I deserve when I leave. But then that was actually playing, I was like, why is this actually in my field? Because it wouldn't leave my field. I still felt a lot of criticism. So, but then I had to realize there was a lot of ego playing, and not just, and this is a self-responsibility, it wasn't just ego on their part, and I couldn't just put the finger on them and blame them anymore. It was like, where is my ego also playing into this? Because that's the only reason this is still in my field, and it's coming at me. So I had to be like, maybe my ego does not want to take on the responsibility how my actions also created this. Maybe my ego was like, I deserve better, which is also probably their attitude. I deserve better than the way this person is interacting with me. So once I started to go inward, and I actually created some distance, and I went inward, and I was like, okay, where are the parts that I need to take self-responsibility for? Where are the parts are my ego and my pride playing into this situation? It actually just shifted entirely. I was able to easily break from it. I was able to move forward from it. We actually ended on a really wonderful way at the end of like a beautiful conversation of understanding. It was still a little bit difficult, but there was some residual energy patterns that I had to heal.
Back on the topic of like being the alchemist, I think, to really make these transformations, any person, whether you're spiritual or not, but you want to transform your inner experience, you have to know a little bit about what you're working with. Yeah. And in the realm of the ego, you got to know that like, oh yeah, like those really strong thoughts you feel, like they are not always right, and they are designed as a whole aspect of your psyche, and at some level maybe even your biology, that's just designed to make you feel right, project onto others, keep culpability away from you. And if you don't, when you know that, and you go into things, like, is that going to change, the tantrum you're having in the moment?
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes, but probably not. When you got all the neurotransmitters and hormones like going through your blood, then. But afterwards, when you know that, if you know that, okay, I gotta be honest.
Yeah.
You can really transform.
Oh, absolutely, and you can see that happen just by taking that finger and like pointing it back towards us. That is the most powerful alchemist thing you can actually do. That is actually full modern day alchemy, turning any situation that you have lead into gold. So any situation you have is like, how can I make this work for me? What is the thing I'm going to learn from this? What is the thing that I can actually bring awareness into my energetic pattern and actually start to shift and say, well, what is the barriers now that now block me from actually embodying my truest, highest self in this? Because that's what the ego does. It wants to keep you in a familiar place. And then so once we do that shift internally, we'll actually start to see the external world does have a lag, but then we'll see the external world change itself.
Something one of the teachers at my school says that I really love is, at my school we often say that the ego, one of the purposes of the ego is to motivate you. Help it's that animal that says like, I can do it, like I can have this, like, and it can be
Yep.
powerful. Obviously downside is the ego, well known. Yet what he really, really opened my eyes to was that there's a big part of your ego that is taken for granted or is kind of shit on. It protects you, you know, like, one of the people that I met recently at Altar at the Ecstatic Dance, you know, we were driving back. I was giving him a ride back, and he was talking about his experience with ayahuasca, which is not an experience I've had. And he said, "Yeah, dude, like when the walls fell down, and like everything that I had unresolved from this life, and maybe even more, came at once. Like that was pretty hard. Like, you know, you have to think to yourself, like, do you really think, like, in one moment, you know, could you handle not having a filter between you, your feelings, and the reality of the physical world?
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, would you even want that? And, you know, it's trying to protect you. Especially, and I'm sure this comes up in your work, especially it was trying to protect you when you were a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll actually see that most, we're actually always evolving, even if we don't even notice it. You could literally not do any healing work and you are still evolving because we're like water and water flows downstream. So we're always attracting things towards us that is actually for our highest good. So you don't need to always break down the wall because you're right. The ego absolutely protects you from something that is not able to manage in that field. It's kind of like, a video that has way too much information coming in and we don't have the bandwidth for it. What do you do? It like stops and pauses. And our nervous system is the very similar way. It like dissociates and separates into be like, whoa, I can't handle this. I need to take a pause so that I can actually come back to it. The only thing that maybe we didn't get skills on when we're younger is we didn't know how to turn the video back on. We didn't know how to come back into it with safety, our nervous system to come back into a situation with safety because we might not have had an environment for safety. So maybe that wasn't an option. So we completely separated ourselves. But when our nervous system starts to heal and we start to feel safety in the body again, this is the part in spiritual healing that all of the yuck and the muck that comes right back to the surface. It's because it says, you know what, I'm ready to unpause this video for you because you have the capacity to handle this.
That is so interesting. I had never thought of it as like we didn't know like how to come back into it. And of course you didn't, you know, when mom and dad are fighting and you're 12 and
yeah,
you know,
we don't have the tools for it.
Yeah, your coping mechanism is I'm going to turn up the volume on my headphones a little bit more.
Yeah.
And it's because, you know, when we use those defense mechanisms, I kind of feel like, and maybe you might feel differently, and if so, please tell me, you know, while they are protective measures, they almost have costs. You know, they leave marks on, you know, whatever you believe, like the energetic body, the nervous system, the psyche, whatever. But they leave these marks, and those are the marks that persist. And I don't think... Well, I think we're starting to learn about those marks. I think even they might even is that the correct term we call it, like a samskara, like in yoga? I think that's kind of like a similar term, although it's a little more karmic, I think.
And this is the interesting part of where free will really takes reign. Because no, we're not responsible for the initial situation that happened that created that thinking and that belief and that emotional state. But we absolutely had free will and choice every single time we decided to go forward and carry that pattern on and not become aware of it. So let's say if it was like dating and I had a situation that happened, and now after that situation, I'm like, you know what? That wasn't fair. Woe is me. I'm the victim in this. Like, how could they treat me like this? And now I go into another relationship in the same energetic pattern. I am also deciding to fully and free will by choice create the same situation because I still think I'm the victim from the initial. So we don't take that time in between big things that happen to us to take a step back and say, you know what, how do I make sure that this does not happen to me again in the healthiest way rather than trying to recreate the narrative and fix it in the situation, in another relationship.
Something I've been talking about this particular concept. I was in my class that I take, my little group on Thursdays, and we were talking about this because my teacher and many of my classmates were saying the same thing. You have to make choices, and I mean, obviously, there's a lot of power and truth in that. And I start to feel like something that's not maybe acknowledged enough, and I'm not saying that you're saying this. This is just my feeling because I feel like this is what. Because I was like, I tried making choices and I still felt like shit. Is that we get so overwhelmed by the energies, the sensations, the flows in our psyche and in our spirit that, I mean, it's almost like, is it really true that it's just as easy as like make a different choice?
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's a missing piece of compassion of like, oh my God, like, you think of someone who's like an alcoholic, like there is something in them that's so powerful that it's overwhelming their will. And like they're not dumb. Like they're watching your life break. And and that's how overwhelming it is. It's like, just make another choice. It's like, okay, I'll make the other choice. And then like the wave of just like your will washing away when that beer is put in front of you. Like, it's not that easy.
No, you're absolutely right. The choice isn't always easy if we haven't gotten to that first step of full acceptance of what actually happened to me and what actually unfolded. This is where that emotion piece that we're coming around, like, from the very beginning comes into, because we got to like bring in all of the pain, all the grief, all the hurt that came from the original situation, and we actually bring that in and say, you know what, I understand that this unfolded this way and I was absolutely hurt and it did impact me. I actually hold compassion for the impact that it had for me, not for what happened, but the impact that it had for me. And now when I actually use that compassion, I move forward with choice, not from we have two options when we make choices. We can either make choices from one energy state or an energy state of our higher self. So a really easy example that's like every day is, think about cleaning your home. There's multiple ways you could clean your home. You could choose to clean your home from the energy of, I need to prove something, I need perfection, I need to have something like perfectly done so no one can see and I can have my mask on. Or I can choose the energy of, this doesn't define my worth the way my home is, but I know that this nurtures me and I want to nurture the environment that I live in. And now I want to clean my home out of a place of love rather than trying to prove something. So that choice is so important, but the energy behind the choice is even more important.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was a huge thing that, I don't know if you've ever read Hawkins, who I think there's probably going to be a counter for the number of episodes where I don't mention him, and that counter will always be 0. He's probably one of my most influential spiritual teachers and authors, and he talks a lot about that like, you really, the energy behind it is what motivates you forward. And say you need a job, it's like, okay, out of fear of like, I don't want to end up homeless.
Out of lack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that'll motivate you. You can get a job that.
It's equally motivating, if not more motivating.
Oh, yeah.
But does that work for you?
Yeah. I mean, because what we've often spoken of in my classes, they say like, well, yeah, but then you're going to like that. You're going to have all that fear entails through that process. And then of course you'll probably repress it for later and wonder why you feel so afraid all the time when there's nothing to point at, but like, I feel afraid. So I start projecting and like, I feel afraid of the government.
Right. Or you get the job and every single move that you make within that job is like, oh my goodness, I'm going to like shit the bed. I'm going to like do something.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to mess this up and someone like, they're going to figure it out. I'm an imposter. And that you come from a place of anxiety.
Well, that's what you coded into even into your physical mind.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you could also say, okay, I want to get a job because I do want to have a nice life. I love myself. So I'd like to have a job that, I can at least justify at some level of why I like it. I don't want to, I don't want to work the midnight shift at Amazon unless I really want to work it, because that's a job I can just get, Yeah. And so with that, sort of like, because it's really like the energy that you put into a thing.
Yeah, intention. It's huge. That's actually alchemy. It's actually learning what energy did I put my action in this situation, and now how can I shift it and change the energy so that now if it's work, again, it's something that nurtures me. It's something that, fuels back into me. It's a tool for me to continue to live in purpose, in divine, with my heart open. So that is actually alchemy, where we actually take a step back from everything. We actually turn the energy of our past situations into something that we can actually utilize and say, you know what, now how is all of those lessons going to benefit me to move into this next choice point with more compassion, with more open heart.
So you found it very useful in that you're turning your lead into gold.
Yeah.
And I think, because it's like that, I think the truth of it is whether you like it or not, is that the nature of our psychic energy, which I'm not saying like psychic and like, as in the energies of our psyche, the feelings, the thoughts, the flows of the spirit, is that unless processed and manifested, they don't go anywhere. They can be transformed.
Yeah. Energy, it doesn't go anywhere. It just gets repurposed.
Oh, Shruthi, can I tell you the honest to God truth? You have been saying so many excellent things tonight. There are things I'm familiar with and I always love rehearing. But you know what my fucking thought is?
Yeah.
I hate that.
Why is that?
Because I hate that is like what the experience is. That is just the mechanism of how it works. I hate it. I just want it to be easy and
you know
feel
what?
good.
That is the most authentic thing you could
I fucking
do.
hate it. I hate that in the physical world you learn.
I hate it. But that is authentic emotion and expression, and that's actually that's your real way to integrate how this impacts you, by actually using your authentic expression of like, you know what? It's not always about light and love. Sometimes you absolutely hate a situation, but that has to be expressed and open for you to bring that in and be like, you know what? I do hate it. Yes. And then once I get through that emotion, then it actually, that energy now gets to have the ability and capacity to transform into something else.
So, okay, we're an alchemist. We are aware that we have X, Y, and Z negativity. They just show up in our fucking system.
All the time.
How do you recommend for average spiritual seeker, just, anyone who's listening to the show, how do you do it? Okay. What do you do? What's the process?
Okay. So if there was something negative coming into my field, if that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. So every single time there is something that is, I guess the biggest cue is like something displeasing happening, right? I don't like this. Simple, like very childlike. I don't like it.
Yeah.
And that is my cue. It's like, I don't like it. And not that, like, sometimes I'll just sit with I don't like it. And so I will go back in and be like, I'll actually feel where is I don't like it in my body. Like, where is that feeling? Because sometimes it's in the gut, sometimes it's in the heart, sometimes it's in my neck and shoulders. And I'm like, where is this I don't like it feeling? And then I will try to see if I can use my breath to just send more energy into that place.
Do you kind of like visualize that, or is that more like tactile, or maybe like a little bit of both?
It's different for a lot of people. Sometimes it's a really strong sensation. For me, I connect with my mind so much and like the psychic intuition. So I'll use an image. So sometimes like I don't like it when this like feeling of overworking, which I tend to do. That's a common energy pattern for me. It always comes up as a horse. Like it's a horse trying to run and go way too fast and it exhausts itself. So I will actually imagine, for me, like the horse, and I will actually try to slow down the horse and actually see if breathing into that part is usually my upper abdomen. If I breathe into it, will the horse in my head actually slow down? It's that mind-body connection. For some people, they'll see like a color, and then we'll try to use the breath and say, can you see that color dissipate or actually expand, and try to manipulate in that way. Yeah.
If you were looking at the looks on my face, it was because that was like, I've been doing a lot of stuff like this and trying to figure it out. And I always do this thing where it's like, I'll hear about a concept, I'll consume a little bit of it and be like, I'm going to figure the rest of that shit out myself. Which I don't know if I recommend or don't recommend. But yeah, that was something I hadn't even considered, as like this sort of symbolic imagery like that. I'm really excited to try that later.
Yeah, because sometimes it actually, if you think of even like karmic knots, we actually use our mind and our imagery so much. It's actually a very childlike nature to use our imagination. So when we're actually in an imaginative state, we disconnect from our ego mind and from our logical mind, and we're actually back from this inner childlike self. So actually using a representative tool for an emotion, for a sensation is super powerful. And then just breathing into it and watching it, like the horse like going or stopping, that allows me, now that like for this example that I'm carrying on, if the horse is actually stopping, all that energy that horse is actually using to overwork and push through, now that's available to use for something else. And that usually for me is going back to self-love and nurturing myself.
How the fuck do you get these things to release, Shruthi? This is really like, my honest, authentic truth is the only thing I fucking care about.
Yeah,
like I need this to stop.
How many times do we hear this message of let go, let go?
Oh my God.
Let go, surrender. And it's like our nervous system actually already knows how to let go and surrender. And this is where I love the Rumi quote, that our task is not to seek love, but all of the areas that are barriers to the love that's actually within us. I probably butchered that completely.
I mean, I don't speak Arabic,
Yeah.
so, you know,
But
I don't even remember exactly what language
so
you
it's
spoke.
actually, what is the barrier that we're putting ourselves in front of ourselves to actually allow that? What is the thing that's stopping us from letting go? So it's not the thing that we actually have to let go. It's the thing that's stopping us from letting go and surrendering. It's kind of like when we have 2 feet on when we're driving and we have one on the gas and one on the brakes. We actually, in order to get back into flow state, we actually want to take our foot off the brakes rather than take it off completely or just press more on the gas.
So like what you're saying is like one of the first steps towards initiating a release is maybe becoming like kind of curious about like what's even like keeping this bottled up, or like what's the fucking problem.
Yeah, or also just like, how does it feel to have this in my field? How does it feel to keep this energy still here with me? And then, because that itself is the barrier of me even trying to get to the answer and trying to fix it, that fix it energy, that is the barrier. I'm trying to fix something.
Yeah, I love that you use the word surrender, because that was how I first learned these things through David's teachings, David Hawkins. And he describes surrender as you become aware of the sensation, you have a sort of mental attitude of like, this does not have to change. And he would recommend even ignoring thoughts. And I sort of in my own, sometimes you do that, sometimes you don't. But yeah, you just have to kind of fucking hate it. You just kind of have to get.
I know, but I love that. That's great that you made that association, because if you think about the true embodiment of love, love is understanding, and love is just noticing. So a true state of love does not seek to change what already is. And so that energy of seeking, that I have to heal, I have to fix something, I have to change something, something's not right that's going on in my life right now, that's not the energy of love. Because that means that I'm pushing away whatever I don't like. Actually allowing it to be in itself will actually change the energy automatically. It's like water, it flows downhill.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, and just to summarize before we continue, it's like what I've learned about a lot of this, if people are wanting a lot of clarity, is like, yeah, you just have to welcome and feel the thing, and it's both physical and like emotional. In that topic of love, I don't think I came up with this idea. I think it might have even originally been from Tolle. You think about like true divine unconditional love. People say, why does God allow a sin-filled universe? And you can say, okay, well, God's a dick. I don't recommend thinking that. We love God. Or at least I do. But if you think about divine love at like a radically high level, it's like Jesus said, the rain of God's mercy falls on the wicked and the righteous alike. And if there was a love so powerful, it literally, the reason why bad things happen in the universe is because the love that runs the universe is so unconditional, it allows everything to exist.
Yeah.
And people might, on a side note of theology, be like, oh, well, that make God an unworthy thing? We could say, well, if that was the only part of the picture, but no, they also kind of incorporated like justice, karma is still a thing. So it's not that in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And in the same way with our own self-love and allowing, we don't always want to just allow like everything, like, you got to take care of yourself.
Boundaries.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as we start to wrap up a little bit more, like, how do you recommend finessing, allowing, forcing the actual release of something that feels stuck in the body? Because you got to feel it in the body. There's a huge power to just the awareness of the thing.
Yeah.
There's a huge power of like deep diving, like what is the actual parts, or even describing those out loud. But like what gets it to like, if such a thing exists, because I get mixed answers on that.
Yeah, I do really agree with like somatic practices are a really great way to connect back to the body, because we tend to intellectualize everything. So the second we can turn off our brain and go straight into the body. So a big one is like shaking. We can shake, and that moves energy. Nature does this all the time too. Like animals, animals shake after they have a state of fear, and they come back in order to re-regulate their system. They shake it all off, right? They also like cuddle. They also like hermit themselves. But it's actually knowing the flexibility of our nervous system to come out of that state. So there's a lot of ways that we can release tension in just by knowing that, you know, if I massage a certain area that tends to have where I located that energy, that itself moves some of the tension away. But, yeah.
So what you're saying is that the release, it's like kind of a combination of maybe knowing a couple principles, and which is shaking, body work, and I'm sure people can Google these pretty easily.
Yeah, and it's also finding what works for you, because what works for me is definitely not going to work for you. So sometimes it's a way to co-regulate. That's another way that we can use that help. You co-regulate every single time you're talking to someone, and it makes you feel like a sense of like your shoulders go down, and you can actually not feel like that breath in your chest. And so those things, just know that you're in a constant state of release all the time. You don't have to force release. It's because it's like that ego, when we come back to it, it's actually bringing up just enough for you to release that you can actually handle. It's not allowing you to...
Yeah, but what if I want like a big release?
I know. But here's the thing. If you had a big release, you would also have a really big hit with all the things that you did not want to face. So it's actually very protective for you to release in slow increment amounts. And when we're in this dopamine charged world that we live in, we want things right away. But the safest thing you can do for your body is to release slowly.
I was afraid you were going to say that, but at the same time, like I'm thinking of like, you've probably seen me like so many times, like at ecstatic dance. I'm just like, I'm fucking dying. Like, why am I the most sad I have been in years? And it's like, oh, because this is what you asked for.
Yeah, I know.
So as we sort of wrap up,
okay.
Tell our audience, like, give them like just, it's just kind of like a summary. How can they be an alchemist for their pain? How can they turn their lead into gold? Like just in any way that you want to share that message. Give our audience the message, and take your time.
Okay. Let's see. I would highly recommend going through the mirror practice when you can. So if there is a situation that you're seeing that you want to push away, I don't like this person that's coming into my field. A way that we can actually be inner alchemists is actually use that reflection of like, what is it about this person, the situation, the circumstance that I am pushing away within myself, right? I don't like how this person reacts to something. Do I tend to have that reaction in my life? Because maybe I have a negative association with those reactions within myself. There's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of shame, and I'm actually pushing it away from myself. So actually becoming an alchemist is saying, how do I notice? First of all, just notice that it's also within me, and then start to hold places of compassion, and actually just that awareness is already moving the energy. So bringing that compassion back to self, and then saying, if once I start to accept it within myself, whatever's in my field no longer disturbs me, no longer becomes an impact of how I move in the world. And now I stand in a sense of self that I control my energy. I am where I'm at. And the somatic practices that you can do, that somatic yoga, there's a lot of great videos out there. I would highly recommend it. Can actually drop us into a place of safety in the body. So now we are in response to what our situation is rather than reactionary to everything. And there's a really wonderful quote from Viktor Frankl, if anyone knows who that is.
Love Viktor Frankl. I bring him up all the time too on the show.
Yeah, and one of my favorite quotes is, between a stimulus and a response, there is a moment, and in that moment lies our power and our freedom. So all of these somatic practices, all of this awareness practice is actually increasing the depth of that moment in between what happens to us and how we respond. And then we get to choose what energy do I want or one aware of, and then go into and make a different choice out of. And that automatically, you will see instant manifestations that happen that way. If you want to talk about how to manifest, that is your fastest way to manifest.
Is there like any other message that you feel called to share with the audience before I think that's a good like stopping point, and then just like I'm gonna make Nose laugh, and then you can plug your shit.
The thing I'm gonna plug my shit on. I would probably say the energy of what self-worth really is. So explore that. If self-worth is different than self-esteem ebbs and flows. Self-worth is truly the only condition for self-worth is that I'm a human being. That's it. And if there's barriers to that, that is where I would start to explore it, because self-worth will be the energy that you will attract love, that you will attract money, that you will attract anything that you want in your life. So the more you start to bring more compassion towards yourself, you will truly start to see changes in your life. I can testify to that automatically.
I hate it, and I was talking about this with my coworkers today at the restaurant I work at. Like, you know, it's just the energy of what is within you and is behind you, not what you put on your face often.
Yeah.
That's often the determinant. And I can promise you it's a thing. I work as a waiter. If I come in with a bad energy, even if I give really great service, and even if I smile and I execute all my jokes perfectly, I get worse tips literally every time.
People pick up on it.
But you come in with a good mood and you're getting crazy good tips. And it's every server I've ever worked with will tell you, oh yeah, that's exactly how it works.
Yeah, and it's not always about being positive. It's actually being the most authentic. So if I'm pissed off, do I take time before I walk into that restaurant to work on myself and say, I notice how pissed off I am. I move that energy through me. And now that actually leaves a capacity for a different energy, for maybe gratitude, even for myself, that I even expressed it.
Yeah, we are conscious beings as much as we are subconscious beings. And the subconscious part of, I think, the human experience is we are aware of the energy of a situation, of another, and of ourselves.
Yeah.
But please tell your audience how where can they find you?
Yeah, so I am the creator and owner of my own practice, which is Ananda Holistic Healing. So I do one-on-one therapy. I also hold workshops, do tarot readings as well. So if you want to dive deeper into the subconscious, that's a great way to do it, because we can see the underlying energy patterns that is running your current situation. We also bring in astrology into the therapeutic space as well. I teach somatic yoga every other week, so if you want to see any links for that, absolutely, I can include it. I'm also in the works for creating an online space for any somatic practices as well, to teach that and meditation. And I'm starting up a tarot YouTube channel, so I will also link that as well if you want to see what are the current energies that is going on in the collective.
Well, Shruthi, this was a conversation very near and dear to my heart. Thank you so much for your time, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
How'd you like it?
I loved it.
Now I'll give you a hug.